All right, Jason Rona here with JConcepts. We're in the JConcepts garage for another vlog episode. I know it's been a while. You've missed us. We brought back Daimon Borkowitz here into the garage to talk a little bit about a lot of our new tool items. And we showed a lot of these at the IFMAR Worlds last year in Spain. And now they're out, they're available. And Daimon, I don't know if you took a look what was going on at the Worlds much for the 8-scale Worlds, and did you see any of these things posted online? And were you curious about when we're going to get our hands on these type of things?
I didn't see a whole lot. I kind of came in, a little after the Worlds, but I'm on Facebook, so I see things that pop up. I noticed, the droop cage kind of pop up there. That looked very interesting. Something I was personally interested to see back in the toolbox. So I'll be happy to talk about that.
So when we're, doing these races, especially like a race like the Worlds, a lot of these tools, were made specifically for things that we get requests for. So, we'll start right off the top here with the droop gauge. It's also a ride height gauge. You can see this is the floating style here where, if you're wanting to make this work just as the droop gauge or as just a floating style gauge in general, then you can let the thing move up and down freely. If you want, you can also work it like, the type of gauge that we normally use for our ride height, which has the ability to kind of clamp down on the adjustment that you want and, what works for the individual racer. In this situation, we got our Juan Carlos Canas vehicle here sitting on the droop blocks, which was another item we showed during the Worlds, which this project kind of started with Spencer Rivkin. He was saying that, hey, Brian Kinwald always told me I should set my droop on these cars using a droop gauge. It starts with having a nice droop block. And so what we did is we incorporated the two sizes that Spencer had asked for, kind of going back to Kinwald telling him to use a 30 millimeter for 10 scale, 36 for 8 scale. So we came up with this, rectangular piece, and we added a little block on it that's blue anodized. So we have the ability to have the two different dimensions just for 10 scale and 8 scale. So Daimon, you can see here we kind of went with the two-piece design. Obviously we got the rectangular piece there, and then we add the blue spacer, which gives us the two dimensions. But when you're out there at these races, specifically you've been doing 10 scale recently, it's used more often right now in 8 scale, but I could see with the way racing is going in 10 scale and the direction things are going, not only is it going to be Spencer using these kind of gauges, but I think we're going to see all the racers using this in 10 scale as time goes on.
I agree. You look over at, kind of like the X-ray pits. I've never seen anybody use a setup station in 10 scale off-road until now, realistically. That was mainly only a thing you've seen in on-road. So I think little things like droop gauges, setup stations, it's going to be a very popular thing we see in the pits.
So when you're using this type of thing, the way we set this up, because we mentioned it is for the droop and ride height, but we have the plates here that are reversible. Well, we can flip the plates to use it between a 30 and a 36 droop block. What we have here is we have the ride height here, and then we have the droop on this side. So if you want to give us, we did a little demo here earlier, but we're just basically, the way this car is just sitting, we can just slide this as it's floating. You can move it up and slide it under your axle, located there in the center. Gives you your droop as related to the chassis height. So on this 8 scale here, the way this one is sitting, kind of built out of the box, but the front is very near zero. It's very near chassis height for your axle. And then in the rear, when you move it to the rear, you get into a measurement that's under the chassis height. So we go to a negative dimension here. So that's what's nice about this type of droop gauge is, we've went through the years, we've measured shock lengths, we've measured the stroke length. I know, Daimon, when you were racing 10 scale, that's obviously a critical dimension from the bottom of the shock body to the top of the shock eyelet. But now we're in a situation where we're comparing the axle height relative to the chassis, which is something the racers can kind of talk about between different brands.
Okay.
So when you got your 10 scale cars out there and you're running, you're at the Reedy race and stuff like that, you're looking at a setup sheet. There was a lot of these dimensions listed. Hey, what's the stroke length on your shocks? But so not only you have that, but you can add on, say, hey, we got an axle height relative to the chassis. So anyway, that's the droop block setup with the floating droop gauge, which can also be used as the ride height gauge. So what I see out there is, a lot of guys will set ride height and a lot of guys will check ride height. To me, when it's floating, you can check the ride height. And then when you set it, that's like, and you clamp down on it, that's where you're setting it at a certain dimension. To me, I think you kind of want to use the floating style to check where it's at. And then if you have a specific dimension you're trying to achieve, then you can always go to the set method on the gauge. So kind of roll it on here. We'll stay with the items, of course, that we showed at the Worlds, but something I'm sure that you're familiar with, Daimon, is building shocks, right? And there's nothing like having a nice set of pliers here that you can clamp the different diameter shock shafts. Here we got 2, 3, and 4. It's kind of a nice item. I used this the other day working on some monster truck shocks, but the 3 came in handy there. But this is something that is not new. I mean, there's a lot of these out there, but we wanted to add something that was nice for the lineup that our racers could use. Not only that, I know Mayfield had mentioned, hey, it'd be nice to have a 17 millimeter hex clamp and a 12. So when you're working on, different axles or you're working on different hexes, you can kind of clamp those and you kind of work on them individually. It's kind of a simple but super practical thing. We also have the ability to snap on the pivot balls here in the center. So that's something that we, in my day, we always just worked with the pliers, kind of fumbled with it until you could snap them in there. But, these things have made life so much easier, especially removing the pivot balls from anything. I experienced that the other day working again on the monster truck. I'm like, pop in and out. And it was nice, clean. You didn't mark up the plastics and mark up a nicely anodized pivot ball. Made a big difference. So that was another item we added. Showed during the Worlds, really liked it. Racers have been using them, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback. So another thing, the wheel nuts. We've made these about 3 or 4 different times now, and it just seems like you can always add another little style cue to it. You can do the serrated portions on the back differently. We're calling these the clutch wheel nuts, and it's not like you're coming in clutch, as a performer, but these particular wheel nuts have a style that looks like the clutch on an 8 scale buggy. They kind of have that progressive, looping design that comes off the center that makes it kind of look like a clutch. So that right away we saw these when we were working on them, we're like, what? I think it looks like a clutch on these cars, and so we went with it. But yeah, I mean, obviously in combination with an 8 scale buggy, you got to have these kind of wheel nuts on the car. There's just no two ways about it. You got to have these kind of options on there because it's got that locking style in the back, and really helps keep the wheels on during the races. So we're really happy with how these came out. We got them again. We got them in the blue anodized, the black anodized, and Daimon, we got the wheel nut wrench here, which is perfect for the new wheel nuts. But you've run a bunch of 8 scale over time, some e-buggy, some nitro buggy, and you can tell that when you put these things on, I mean they are on there.
Yeah, no, you're not getting them off if you don't have something that you can really get some good torque. And that's one good thing about this thing is having a big handle that it does. You're going to really be able to get in on there.
Yeah, so when we kind of went over this with a lot of our drivers, and we've had a bunch of these over the years too, just trying different methods, trying a different look, trying a different function. And when we get to this point, we usually get either from Ryan or Spencer. It's like, man, I just want the handle to be bigger. I want to be able to really have a lot of ability to torque on or off. Yeah. And you got to watch it when you're going on with these type of wheel nuts because they will grip, they will overpower the situation. And but you go on, slightly snug, but then, they're always the off is the part where you need the big handle for.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a big improvement over, I think the last one, it was a very skinny handle. So you kind of had to use your fingers and you didn't really get that big of a grip. But with this, you're going to really be able to grab onto there.
So kind of continuing along with the 8-scale items, we got this all steel kind of multi-tool, multi-wrench here, which is, if you want to drop it in on the glow plug here, it's when you're at these races, you see this over and over again, coming in and out with the glow plug. We went with the top with more of a knob shape, something that you can kind of rest the top of your hand on. So it's, not so, it's not really going against your hand so hard. We got a nice dome top on there. So anyway, and then on the one side, we got the 5mm, which, which is for like the pivot balls, like on the car here, so you can, take those in and out. So you got the 5mm, but it's a pretty common wrench, but something that everybody has to have, whether it's for the glow plug, whether it's for the pivot balls, the multi wrench here really kind of does it for us. So in the wrench zone here, we're going to talk about all these open wrenches. And you asked when we started, you're like, hey, why do we need all these wrenches? It's like we have a bunch of different sizes. Well, this kind of started because of we're getting requests for new drivers coming into this, and they don't have a full toolbox yet. They don't have everything that maybe we've all acquired over the years. So we wanted to put together a set, from 7mm down to 3mm. That is something that can be, in your pit box, in your pit bag, wherever you have it, and you just have a nice, open, easy to use wrench. And one side we got our JC logo, the other side we got the size, in this case 7mm. So it really gives the option to, sort of either if you're an entry level or if you're just super experienced and got to have it all, a variety of wrenches. And going down to the 3.63, which is the one we use for the JConcepts turnbuckles, that's for 10 scale, and then 5 for 8 scale. So we went ahead, and these are all manufactured in steel because I know you've used a few of these over the years, and the aluminum works for a good amount of time, but you can stretch, you can bend. The anodizing kind of takes it on the chin after a while, and it's something that kind of wears an aluminum item. So we wanted to make sure that these were pretty heavy duty. We knew, half of them will probably be used on an 8 scale. And, as well as anybody, when you're torquing on these things, there's no mercy.
No, you need some leverage on those.
So that's the selection there. That's the reason why we have so many. But I think it's good all the way around because, there's different turnbuckles on a lot of these different kits. There's different sizes for everything. And I think we kind of hit the vast majority of them here with this selection. And with the steel material, then we got the different color coatings here. We got the gold, as you mentioned, the black, and then we kind of have the the slick look, the oil slick, which I think is one of the hot terms on the internet for these kind of tools. But jumping over, if you know a little bit more of what you're doing, the sizes you're going to be using more often. We narrowed it down to 3 different wrenches, which is also part of the set. And, we still have the same type of sizing on these, but it's a double-ended wrench. So, in a situation where maybe you want the JConcepts turnbuckle size on one side, 363 and the 5.0, you have it there on the one wrench. You move over to this one. You got the 7.0 and the 4.0 on one. So this might be more of your 8 scale or different sizes that you use at the top of a two-wheel buggy, the shock, the nuts at the top of the tower, or the slipper, that type of thing. So that one, it comes in handy. And then we obviously got the 3.0 and the 4.0, which is just, other companies out there that got different turnbuckles. These are kind of handy. So the double-ended wrench, kind of handy if you know what you're going to be using it for, the cars that you use. And then obviously these are a little more if you just have a bunch of different vehicles and you need to kind of fit it all. That's what that set is for. So, kind of moving through the wrenches. A lot of these things are multi-purpose. Some of them are specific for maybe 8 scale or a basher, but some of them are also 10 scale. And obviously like the pliers, we use those for a bunch of different things. So getting these things kind of finished, done, and out big project on our part since the Worlds, trying to finish all these things and get them out. But we kind of accomplished that here towards the end of the year and moving into 2025. I know one of your favorite things is some of these organization boxes that we've come out with. The toolbox, we got the storage box, and then now we got the hardware box. So I went with the double clinch clasp system here with obviously the pivoting lid, the hard lower section. We got 12 different divider possibilities here. This is all custom designed, and we designed these so that we have a radiused bottom. So, anybody that knows when you dig the screws out of here, one of the toughest things is you get these out that are these little tiny ones. Mm-hmm. If these are all square edges at the bottom of this tray, then they always get caught in the corners.
You're fumbling.
Yeah, you can't get them out, or you hit one of these dividers and the divider pulls up and then two of your screw sizes go together, which, that's been happening to me since the beginning of time. Just every time you're in here, inevitably you hit one of these dividers, your screws go into each other, and then pretty soon you're back to separating them again, and all you needed was one. So what we did is we added screws to secure these dividers at the bottom, and that's what kind of keeps these things in here and just doesn't allow them to come out. So it's kind of a simple, practical thing we've added to this just from being annoyed over the years. And then obviously the radius bottom. So between the radius bottom and then the ability to secure these things, just really kind of makes this a next level item to hold the screws. And it's something you don't notice. And I've gotten some messages and different things from the drivers that are like, hey, I didn't really realize how I wanted or needed this until I actually used it. And then I was like, okay, now I get it. But you've had these in your box over the years, going to the races that we've been to, and I know that you've had all these things happen. I've had them happen 1,000 times. So talk to us about when you kind of organize a box like this, setting this up for your hardware. We just went smallest to biggest here, but talk to us about some little parts and little things that you've kind of seen throughout the years that maybe you would outfit something like this with, shock piston, shock parts. Just, give us a little rundown of what you could kind of see outfitting something like this with.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. That's kind of the first thought that came to my mind is a shock rebuild box. I had something very similar. Plano makes a box that's like this. But again, if you use that, I'm sure you've had it happen to you. You go to get a screw out and it launches itself, or you launch 3 or 4 out, then you're fumbling around trying to find screws, or like you said, you hit a divider comes up, they all scatter together. It's horrendous. Yeah. But again, with shock parts, I was already thinking, you got your O-rings, bigger O-rings, shock caps, things like that. It's a very, I always liked putting things in one little box. So if I wanted to rebuild my shocks, I grab my shock box, it's all right there. So that would be the main thing I used it for. You have it set up perfectly here from smallest to biggest with the screws here. That would be one other use. I would say maybe some slipper parts or something like that. That would probably be another good use for a box like this.
Yeah, in general, if you're into 8 scale, it's like clutch parts, right?
Yep.
You're going to go heavy in the clutch parts. You're going to have a couple flywheels, maybe some clutch bells. You're going to have the actual clutch themselves, all the springs. So those are all tiny parts. It's really kind of the essence of this is to use it with the small parts, screws and clutch parts and all these type of things that you don't want, kind of intermingling with each other. You want to keep them separate. You want to be in, you want to be out, and rebuilding those items. So Daimon, we got a nice selection of product here. Obviously we're spread across different platforms, different scales, but I think we kind of hit on some things that we didn't have before, and we improved on some things that we already had that, we took, racer advice like yourself and others out there who said, hey, I've used this, or maybe we didn't have this yet. So we incorporated a lot of these new ideas into these new products, and we appreciate you joining us here in the JConcepts garage, and we'll see you next time.